All right, thanks so much for spending some time with us. As most of you know, if you listen to the show for any length of time, I am a huge proponent of school choice, and I think the expansion of the ESA program is a great thing for the future of Arizona. But I've also said that with every other government program, we should be getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse every chance we can get. Recently, the Attorney General of Arizona made a statement of accusation against the Superintendent of Public Instructions that they are allowing misuse of funds and that it needs to stop immediately. Yesterday, the governor was on with Outspoken yesterday afternoon, and I want you to hear very quickly. This is what the governor said about ESAs with the boys in the afternoon.
Tom Horne and Chris Mays fighting, and it's all about the ESAs. And I think what Mays was saying is, how are you just letting these purchases, these frivolous purchases under $2,000, how are you allowing that? And Horne said, well, I'm not allowing it. We're going back and we're trying to find out if any of those purchases under the $2,000, was a frivolous. Right. Do you like that Chris Mays has jumped into the fray here?
Well, let me first say the way to have avoided those misspent funds is to not have implemented the policy he implemented where he stopped approving purchases under $2,000. So this is kind of a deal of his own making. But no, I think I've criticized this unrestricted entitlement spending since the get-go and welcome more folks into the fray.
So I have my own opinions on this, which I'll get to a little bit later. But in an attempt to be fair with this, joining us now is the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tom Horne. Mr. Horne, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Mike. It's always great to be with you.
So how do you respond to the statement you just heard from the governor that she made here yesterday and the Attorney General? How do you respond? Is this a problem of your own making?
No, it's not. First of all, let me say, if it's anyone's making, it's really the governor's, which I'll explain the reason why. But first of all, let me say we have 90,000 students in ESAs. We have 1,200,000 students in public schools. So ESAs are not a threat to the public schools. But what it does do, it gives parents who feel that their child's needs are not being met at the public school to find another school that does meet the child's needs. And I don't understand how anyone can say the parents don't have a right to do that unless they're so immersed in ideology that they forget about the needs of the children. And that's exactly the situation with the governor and the attorney general. They're appealing to the left-wing people who have ideology that blinds them to the interests of the children. So in this case, we have 12 people to check the purchases, which is exactly how many the program had when it was 1/7 as large. So it got to the point where it took over 2 months to reimburse people who were entitled to, spent their own money, were entitled to reimbursement, and that was an unbearable burden. So the legislature passed, and the governor signed a bill that said we were instructed to use risk-based auditing. Risk-based auditing means for purchases under $2,000, we pay them right away to avoid the 2-month delay, and then we audit. Now, what neither of them mentioned is we have collected or in the process of collecting over $600,000 of improper purchases. Everything that Chris Mays mentioned, we have suspended the accounts, and we're going to be terminating accounts of people who were abusive. No one has been more adamant about being sure that these funds are used for proper purposes than I have been. I hired an auditor that they never had before. I hired an investigator that they never had before. And in fact, I'm involved in a primary, as you know, arguing that I've been too strict in making sure that the purchases are for valid educational purposes and at a reasonable cost according to market to meet the child's needs. And so everything Chris May said was pernicious garbage. She just made things up. She didn't bother to mention that we had collected, or in the process of collecting, 600,000 of improper purchases, and the whole point is to discredit the program that enables parents to find schools that meet their child's needs when the public schools are not meeting their needs. So it's a lot of utter nonsense. Now, when the governor says it's a problem of my making, it's a problem of her making, because the House had in its budget to give us an additional 12 people so that we could keep up with the audits before we paid any money out. And she told the House that if they didn't take that out, she would veto the budget. This was just before a failure of the budget would result in a government shutdown. So the House had to take that out of their budget, and it required them to pass this provision for risk-based auditing, which she signed. So if it's anyone's making, it's the governor's making, and the big problem with both the governor and the attorney general is that they're so ideologically opposed to parents having a right to find a school that meets their child's needs that they forget about the interest of the students.
So let's talk, and I agree with everything that you are saying, and I was not aware that there was an additional 12 auditors that were going to be hired, so that would have basically doubled your auditing staff in order to expedite this going back and trying to recoup some of that money. Is that correct?
Right, and the governor said, if you don't take it out, I'll veto it. So she created the problem.
All right, so let me ask you a couple of solutions that I've been looking into and people have been recommending. One of them is, I have a health savings account and I have a flexible savings account where I use a debit card with money that's in an account for all of my medical purchases. I can purchase anything of, medicinal value, but it also knows on that card, if I go to a CVS and I get my prescriptions, but I buy a bag of chips along with it, that debit card kicks out the purchase of the chips. Is that readily available where something like that could happen to this, or does it not apply or would not apply to the ESA program?
Well, those kinds of improvements in technology cost a lot of money. The Class Wallet, which is our vendor, has said they will develop the technology, but it's not developed yet to be able to trust debit cards. When we took office in 2023, our Democrat predecessor had built up a backlog of over 100,000 requests that had not been met. So we had a horrendous problem, and we found that the biggest part of the problem were the debit cards. So we eliminated new debit cards. We let the old people keep them, and we were letting special ed parents keep them. But basically, we eliminated new debit cards until the technology catches up, and it can be done automatically like that.
Okay, and then the other question I had posed to me this morning is it possible now with AI, is it possible for AI and work in the background to audit these things faster, to catch these purchases faster? Are you using technology as part of the auditing process? And if not, is there a way to implement things like AI in making this a better process?
Well, that's the same answer that I just gave you, which is yes, when the technology gets to that point, it's definitely possible. It's done by private companies, but they've spent many millions of dollars on it, and we haven't been given that kind of money to spend on developing it. Class Wallet is developing it, but it's taking them time.
And the other thing I'd like to point out is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the kind of high-profile convictions that the Attorney General has talked about was people that were abusing the ESA program, and they were able to get a conviction of people that were doing that misuse of funds from out-of-state people was found by your office.
That's correct. And one problem that we've had with the Attorney General is that she's refused to prosecute people who tried to defraud us, but we caught it before we lost any money. So we had a recent case where a woman fraudulently put the name of a doctor on a note that the doctor didn't know about, and in order to get her child on special ed status, which would mean they would get $20,000 instead of $7,000. We can't give that to her because she said she won't. It didn't cost us any money, but it's outrageous fraud. So we're giving those cases to the county attorney because the attorney general is refusing to prosecute them.
So the last question is, Mr. Horne, ideally, in your mind, how do you make a balance? Because I think you're right. The waiting that extended period of time to reimburse families that can't afford the thousands of dollars laying out is not fair to those families. But ideally, what is the way to fix this? Because I would say that the oversight of this program is better than any other program of government dollars being spent. But it's still, if you're going to make it perfect, if you're going to get as close to perfect as possible, what is the solution if you could have anything that you think would be best?
The solution is to elect a Republican governor who won't threaten to veto a bill giving us the additional 12 people we need so that we can audit before we pay anything on a timely basis.
Yeah, it seems like a very simple answer, and I think that you're right, and I'm glad you said that, because if we wanted this program to be efficient, if it was about efficiency, and the legislature was willing to give you the people necessary to do that, or the money for those people, it would seem like the governor would call that a solution to the problem. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the legislature was willing to do it, but the governor said she would veto it unless they took it out.
Mr. Horne, it's always good to talk with you. I appreciate it. I wanted to give you some equal time here to state your case. I'm glad that you did, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it very much.
All right. That is the superintendent of public schools, Tom Horne, giving his side of the story. And, you know, you've got to decide for yourself which is true. But if it's true that the governor told the legislature, I will not sign a bill that adds 12 more auditors, and then she comes on this radio station and tells this audience, not my audience, but the KTAR audience, that this is a problem, that they're not doing it, and he created it, I think there's a discrepancy there that people ought to be looking into.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch and listen to the new season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.